Okay, thank you for joining me and thank you for being here. I am Kasey, and this month we were really focusing on Godzilla, and next week we are starting our month on one of my favorite series, The Venture Brothers. But we had an extra week to fill in, so I wanted to try and do a little short and sweet marathon on something entirely unrelated and try that, see how that works. I scoured my DVD collection looking for something that I wanted to talk about, but nothing so in-depth that it constituted its own Through My Eyes video, if that makes sense. And I found it this time around in the Missing in Action trilogy. I picked up this DVD set so long ago, I actually forgot when and where. I know I, at one point, had caught the second movie on cable TV, and it was the time of Chuck Norris jokes, so I swept it right up and only got through the first two. So yeah, stick around for my blind thoughts on Missing in Action 3, I guess. And if I don't do a good enough job of dissuading you from watching these movies, though, and you really do want to check these out for yourselves, a quick Google told me that it is pretty accessible, streaming on demand on a few platforms, so go knock yourself out or try and track down a DVD like I did. Otherwise, let's get into it. 1984's Missing in Action. American servicemen are being held captive in Vietnam, and only one man can bring them home in this blistering, fast-paced action-adventure starring martial arts superstar Chuck Norris. Colonel James Braddock, Norris himself, armed with top-secret information and state-of-the-art weaponry, is prepared to blast his way into Vietnam, but can he blast his way back out? So I weep for whatever the newspapers would put as the headline the day following the events of this movie, especially from the Vietnamese side. Accused war criminal invades North Vietnamese based on baseless allegations, because no matter the outcome, this wouldn't be spun in Chuck Norris's favor here, especially not right away. Regardless of the ultimate justifications, it is never going to not feel weird rooting for a suspected war criminal from a war that had real war criminals committing atrocities. This isn't my first time watching this installment nor the sequel, so I'd feel confident in saying that the first Missing in Action movie released is not my particular vibe. The lead character in James Braddock is neither poorly written nor poorly performed necessarily, but a lot of the supporting roles are far less even, with the exception of the always amazing James Hong. The sending of, again, suspected war criminal, though, to a country in which he is wanted never sat as well with me as the movie would have wanted. The titular action of the movie is a moderate balance between Chuck Norris being the white ninja in Vietnam and his pointing a gun at something off-screen and then it blowing up. If that is the kind of action that gets you going and you enjoy America fuck yeah movies, you could really do a lot worse than this. Missing in Action 2, The Beginning, from 1985. Chuck Norris returns as Colonel James Braddock in this intense, action-packed prequel to the original hit. Captured during a daring mid-air rescue operation, Braddock and his men are imprisoned by the insane Colonel Yin, who stops at nothing to break their spirits. For Braddock, the choice is clear. With fists, high explosives, and sheer courage, he becomes an army of one. So IMDb once told me that this was intended to be the first in the franchise and was filmed as such, but was shelved because what we know as the first Missing in Action movie would do better. I don't know, it feels like this story would have done a lot better if told sequentially, and I also do not love We Killed Rats because someone forgot to bring rats to the set one day. That sucks on so many levels. As do a lot of characterizations of this movie. The amount of unsolicited hate being thrown around feels especially cynical, more so than badass or stoic. Plot-wise, this is a very straightforward prisoner of war story, one of my favorites amongst the entire genre of the war movies. Which, can we talk about for a second how war is like a genre with its own tropes and cliches? That feels kinda fucked up in a way I don't think we talk about enough. So it's standing up against movies like The Great Escape and The Bridge Over the River Kwai does not do a lot in its favor, even though it is ultimately emulating those pictures in Vietnam and with more explosions. I also understand this particular installment was based on the story of a veteran, which definitely should be noted, but so was American Sniper, and that was one of the most racist bestsellers I've ever had the displeasure of reading myself. I also haven't read the book Missing in Action is based on, so I don't think this should reflect the author or his service in any way, shape, or form. Still don't really love this movie, though, a little more than the first. It's just more even across the board and features Creighton Duke from Jason Goes to Hell as a secondary antagonist, and he brings so fucking much to this movie, you cannot believe it. Then we have Braddock, Missing in Action 3 from 1988. Colonel Braddock, Chuck Norris again, goes back to Vietnam, but this time it's personal. Long after the fall of Saigon, Braddock discovers that his wife and son are still alive, living in squalor under communist rule. Stopping at nothing to bring them home, Braddock returns to the jungle of Nam to teach the enemy one simple lesson. Don't mess with an American vet's family. Here is a fun little morbid fact. The same day the verdict for the helicopter tragedy of the Twilight Zone movie was shared, 4 men died in a helicopter accident filming this movie. Something that would happen again just 2 years later in Delta Force 2. The titular Braddock apparently had a wife he got married to while in Vietnam we didn't know about, which definitely tracks as a trope based in reality from what I understand about Vietnam and the Vietnam War. Centering this rescue mission on our title character searching for his wife and son probably makes the most narrative sense for the missing family trope that is still very popular in action movies today. And I thought this movie largely handled it pretty well. The action here is largely the same. Honestly, a lot of it could be cut and switched with what we got in the first movie, and I probably wouldn't notice. That has to be the main thing that was a little underwhelming for me this time around. Norris's style of action is just not one I'm particularly in love with, apparently, and it's been an ongoing issue with all of these movies. Norris himself is probably bringing a touch more earnestness to his performance here, where in the prior 2 movies it felt a lot like Braddock was just reading one-liners from a stoic how-to manual. I much prefer the minutiae we see here from Chuck Norris. Missing in Action 3 is probably thrice as corny as the 2 movies that came before, but it is so much less cynical throughout that this is probably my preferred movie in this trilogy. And that is the final movie in the Missing in Action trilogy. Please argue with me if you think I am wrong about these movies, but none of these are so good that anyone should have died making them. Not even the rant Norris opted to chew on in Missing in Action 2. I am glad I finally checked out these movies off the list of things I've watched, and I might put on the second or third movies again, but I doubt it unless I'm given a real reason. And again, next week we're doing The Venture Brothers. It is a personal favorite series for me to cover, and we're doing it because it's my birthday month, so why not do it? We got 2 videos on the Venture Brothers coming next month, the first Friday and the third Friday. Other than that, that's really all I have to say. I'm also really bad at self-promotion. I started a second channel for a very different project of mine, in which I am narrating an ongoing science fiction adventure narrative of my own making. Every Monday through Friday I'm reading a full page of the story. Right now we should be almost 5 chapters into the narration, and the entire first book is written, so don't think I'm going to drop this story on you or it's going to just end. Please check out Endrymaion. Link will be in the video description to that channel. Otherwise, please keep being amazing and kind, and don't kill rats in your movies.